Playoffs? Then keep our CBS Sports Radio toll-free number handy. 855-212-4CBS.
CBS Sports Radio.
The only way you can take CBS Sports Radio 1140 with you is with the radio.com app. Download it today and listen to us anytime, anywhere. You found the most in-depth coverage of the Silver and Black. The nation and the league arrive in Las Vegas in 2020. Live from the CBS Sports Radio 1140 studios, it's Silver and Black Today. Join the conversation by calling 702-889-5978. And now, here's your host, Scott Gulbransen.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Happy Sunday to everybody out there. Summer Sunday, and you are listening to Las Vegas's only all Raiders talk show, and that, of course, is the Silver and Black here on CBS Sports Radio 1140. Brought to you by our sponsors, the local 872, the men and women building the Raiders' new stadium. And, of course, that stadium had some big news this week as well with other activity. We'll talk about that a little later in the show because it's a big deal not only for the Raiders, but also for the state of Nevada and for the Las Vegas Bowl. So there's a little tease, as they call it in the biz, for you. Also, today's show brought to you by Moneyline Sports Bar and Book at Park MGM, home of the NBA Finals and the NHL Stanley Cup Final. Come by and enjoy great food, beer specials for each playoff game. Tonight, the Blues will try to close out the Bruins on ice. And Monday night, the Raptors hope to win the first NBA title in franchise history. Come to Moneyline at Park MGM, eat, drink, and bet. There you go. So we are back. Thanks to our sponsors for bringing you this show, because without them, we don't have it. So we appreciate it very, very much. Park MGM and, of course, the men and women at the local 872. Joining me today, as always, are my co-hosts, partners in crime. First of all, Mr. Kelly Kreiner. How you doing, Kelly?
Excellent, gentlemen. How are we doing this morning?
Doing good, brother. It's a good day. We get to talk about Raider football again. Chaz Osborne also here. Chaz, how you doing, buddy?
Oh, good. I actually went to the MGM, the money line the other night to watch the hockey game.
Did you?
Yeah.
Did you enjoy it?
Good food, good times in there.
Yeah. Our friend Tony Cardasco with Saturday Sports Beat, which runs in this time slot on Saturdays, was out there doing a remote with Paul Ihander here from CBS Sports Radio. So
it's good times.
Good stuff. All right. So today's show, we have a lot in store for you. Of course, the big one is Steve Delsohn, who's a Peabody Award-winning journalist and writer. He was at ESPN, won the Peabody for his work on the NFL concussion issue as part of Outside the Lines. So if you've watched that show, you've probably seen work by Steve. Steve is going to be here to talk about one of my favorite Raider subjects, and that, of course, is the Tooz, John Matuszak, who left us 30 years ago next week, believe it or not. So he passed away 30 years ago last week. So Steve was the co-author of his autobiography. So we're going to talk to Steve for the second half of this hour to talk to him about John Matuszak, because it's really a fascinating story. And, guys, I don't know about you, but in prep for the show, because I know we all were looking at information and reading Steve's book and other accounts of John Matuszak's life and career, not a lot of stuff out there. Like, I mean, there's stuff on him, of course, but for as good of a player as he was, now we're going to get into this later, he could have probably been much better and had a better career had he not had a lot of the off-the-field issues. But I was just surprised that there just wasn't more out there, because usually like a guy like this, you find just a ton of information.
Yep.
But there's clearly, most people know him from a movie where you couldn't even tell it was him, and that, of course, was
Hey, you
Goonies.
guys!
Hey, you guys!
Ice Pirates, man.
Ice Pirates. So you like
better
Ice
movie.
Pirates.
Not better than Goonies, but it's a better part.
I understand. Yes.
One Crazy Summer.
One Crazy
That was
Summer
fun.
is great in that, too. So we're going to talk a lot about John Matuszak today, and I think you guys will enjoy that. It's part of Raider history, and he obviously won 2 Super Bowls with the team, and so we want to explore that, and Steve Delsohn will join us. In the second hour, we're going to talk about a little bit about the Raider mystique, about those players, because the golden age, if you call it, or the silver age, I guess, we don't call it golden age, of Raider football in the 70s and 80s, the Bad Boys, and all the great stories you hear from folks like Phil Villapiano and others, could that even happen in today's league? I mean, could you even have personalities like John Matuszak, like Lyle Alzado? We're going to talk about that and ask that question top of the second hour. Then we have Kelly's Corner. Kelly's going to talk a little bit about Canada, eh?
Hey.
And then bottom of the second hour, if you're looking for, guys, a stadium update, especially on the financials, how things are going, what's happening there, Jeremy Aguero from Applied Analysis, which is a group working with the stadium, and Jeremy also, if you watch any of the Stadium Advisory Committee meetings, Jeremy's the guy who runs the meeting. He's phenomenal, just a brilliant guy. He's going to be with us at 9:30 to talk about that. And then we'll close out the show talking about some more Raider news and information. Also, big guest announcement for next week. So you don't want to miss that one, guys. We have somebody really fascinating, interesting as we explore players during the summer here and really get in depth on some of them. This is a Raider, this is a Raider who is infamous and continues to be and has had just a amazing life full of trouble, but also hopefully in his redemption period. So we're going to talk about that and let you know who that is. So that's an update on what's going on with today's show, gentlemen. This week, talking about the Raiders, and we're going to get into OTAs in after the next break, and really think about what happened this week. But when you look at the Raiders, I'm just getting the sense overall, and maybe OTAs I think are way overrated. It's just for football fans and for media folks like us, it's just something to talk about. But I just get the sense that the cohesiveness going into this season, going into training camp next month, at the end of next month, it just seems different. Maybe that's year two. Kelly, are you picking up on any of that? Are you buying any of it, or you think it's too early?
It's a little bit of the year two thing with Gruden. That initial shock and excitement's over. The guys are kind of, but it's also you brought in a lot of older veterans, so it's like you're in that phase where you're trying to get everybody kind of together. So we saw it with AB at Derek showing up at Derek Carr's house. Mm-hmm. So you're getting these guys trying to get intertwined and everything before the season starts, and you're going to see that a lot more when you bring in a bunch of high priced kind of. It's everybody's trying to put on their best foot forward, so to speak.
That's nice though. Everybody, they've all just got positive things to say about each other, and that's what OTAs are, right? We talked about that last week. Just a positive. You don't want to hear anything negative as long as everything's just status quo. And they're getting their work done. That's the most important thing. No bad news is coming out of it.
The less we have to talk about, the best for the team in the season.
Yeah, absolutely. But it sounds like they're all on the same page. They all got this positive energy going. We're moving in the right direction.
Yeah, no, I think that, and that's important. I think you look at, there's still some outside sources, or not sources, outside influences. The media in general, I think outside of the Bay Area media, covering them, which I think the Bay Area media has done a good job of accurately capturing what's going on there. But to me, though, I think you're just starting to, you're right, Kelly, year two, but it's just things are smoothing out, right? And when things smooth out like that, you just have less volatility. And so I think we're seeing that stability. You now have a coach that, again, is going to be there for 10 years, unless something drastic happens, which I doubt. So the commitment there, the regime, if you call it, you have Mike Mayock there. That seems to be working really well. Mm-hmm. And I think once you get into camp, if you guys agree, I think once you get into camp and you start hitting people and all that starts happening and you're spending much more time together as a full team, that's when we'll see kind of how this team is shaping up. Not only from on the field, but also from a locker room perspective, right?
Yeah, the OTAs, the non-contact, all that stuff like that, it's easy to be all happy and friendly and everything. But you're right. Once you start getting physical, once you start, you start getting into, actual contact to where it's like, okay, now you're playing for position, now you're playing for spots.
Right.
That competition's going to kind of breed some of the bad stuff that you hear about in OTAs, like the fights that you see on ESPN or whatever. So now it's just time to get all together, be all happy and smiley before the real stuff starts.
Yep.
Yes, like REM, shiny happy people, right?
Who?
Oh my gosh, yeah. But what's interesting too, and Chaz, you picked up on it, was a little bit of the change in vocabulary.
Yep.
We've seen they are the Oakland Raiders for this year, right? Kelly,
Yep.
you talked about this in pre-show. But you're starting to see them talk about the Raiders.
Right.
Hey, being a Raider. Not a lot. The Oakland stuff's starting to come back a little bit as they make this transition. Again, a hard transition to move from one market to the other, but it's happening.
It was a weird one. Yeah, when Antonio Brown last week, when he was talking, he said he was about to say Oakland Raiders. He kind of stopped himself, and then he just said the Raiders. And I'm wondering, are they just kind of pulling back and already distancing themselves from Oakland? It's something they should embrace, obviously, for this last year.
Well, and I don't know if it's distancing or if it's just more of, hey, we have to start thinking about the future.
Yep.
It's not a diss. It's you have to start training yourself to think about, hey, we are going to be Las Vegas's team. That's going to be our home.
Right.
And so we need to do that. But just really interesting to see that dynamic happening and what's going on there. Las Vegas is definitely mentioned a lot more now when you hear conversations, especially Gruden. Gruden's actually mentioning the two words Las Vegas, which he stayed away from all of last year. But that's part of everything transitioning over. By the way, the building, the headquarters in Henderson is going up fast. I don't know if you guys saw it.
No.
You're right by Costco, you said, this weekend.
Oh,
It's right
yeah.
there.
Is it really? Just too busy trying to get in there for those free samples.
Yeah, it's right. You're trying to get the pierogi samples. But anyway, so it'll be interesting. But that thing is going up fast, and it's just becoming more of a reality here, and so it's going to be fun. Now, when we come back from the break, we're going to talk about OTAs. We're going to hear from Vontaze Burfict. We're going to hear from Paul Gunther, and we're also going to hear from Fred Bolitnikoff in Canada A.
Oh, take off.
That's right. We appreciate it. We're going to talk about that. What do you guys think? 702-889-5978 is the number. You can get on the air in this next segment. At the next break, we will be talking about OTAs. You're listening to the Silver and Black today here on CBS Sports Radio 1140.
Giants, today at noon on CBS Sports Radio 1140.
This is Silver and Black Today, live on CBS Sports Radio 1140.
Haven't.
Yes, welcome back, everybody. This is Silver and Black Today here on CBS Sports Radio. I am your guide through this world of the silver and black.
Yeah.
Scott Branson, joined by my co-host Kelly Kreiner and Chaz Osborne. We're here to talk about Raider football, of course, the Las Vegas Raiders football, soon to be. And guys, let's jump into OTAs and talk about what we heard this week. One of the talks of OTAs when you look at the coverage and you see folks who've been out there observing is the fact that Vontaze Burfict, one of the signings that I think some Raider fans took exception with because of the off-the-field issues, because of the suspension issues. So it wasn't as bad as the incognito, which we'll talk about in another second. But I do think that it was one that people questioned. Now, what we're hearing out of OTAs is that Burfict is acting every bit the veteran leader that you'd want him to be. Yep. He's showing the maturity. He's showing the desire to teach and guide younger players. And to me, that is really encouraging. So we're going to listen to some sound here from Vontaze Burfict. The first cut, number one, to our crack engineer, David Stepanian, is Vontaze talking about this team and leadership and how good they could be. Here we go.
Yeah, like I said, you got to be a leader out there. You got to lead by example. You have to make sure you're doing your job so they can have confidence in you when the game time comes. And putting guys in the right position. Like if I have to make a line stunt for the D linemen, putting them in the right position as well, because obviously they have their hand in the dirt. So, like I said, just being accountable, being on time to everything, and making sure you're doing every rep in the weight room.
So there he is, Vontaze Burfict on leadership, right, guys? So that's what you want to hear right now. I mean, you can hear all you want. At the end of the day, it comes down to when the rubber meets the road. But very encouraging to hear him talk about that, right?
Yep.
Well, but what do you expect him to say, though? I mean, and I'm not. I'm not dumping on him or anything right now.
There's that realism again.
Well, no, but it's like everybody's in the best shape they've ever been. Everybody's playing amazing in OTAs. Everybody's being like, him on the field's never really been an issue. But the suspensions and hits and stuff. I mean, he's kind of got that reputation, so anything that's borderline, he's just getting hit with it at this point, whether it should be or not. But I mean, what else do you expect coming from out of OTA?
Right.
If he comes up and does an interview is like the opposite of that,
then we got
like
something to talk about.
then that's exactly what you're exactly what you're expected him to say.
That's what we talked about in the first segment. Everybody's talking positive and
it's
about everybody. But it was nice, he had high praise for Cleveland Farrell and some of the young guys. So it's nice for him to hear him talking, good about the younger guys, because usually it's more of like hazing and
can't do that anymore.
Right.
No hazing. Well, they have the master hazer, Richie Incognito, right? He's I couldn't resist that one. But no, I think to your point, Kelly. Yes, of course, it's going to be a lot more cheerleading, a lot more rosy picture for everybody, because you're just out there running around doing off-season workouts. Everybody feels good. Everybody's positive. Nothing has given them any issues to where there might be some dissent and things like that. At the same time, to see him step up like that, because guys, what's he going to say? Yes, he can say it, but what we're hearing away from the press conferences is that is actually happening and that he is backing it up with his actions. Now, they did ask him also, and I had this reversed, but they also did ask Burfict about this defense particularly. It's a very difficult defense for younger players to learn. Mm-hmm. So that's why they need a veteran like Burfict, who played 8 years in that system, to do that. And here's what he had to say.
We can be great. We just got to put the pieces to the puzzle. I feel like this team is very competitive, and everybody feeds off each other's energy. When Nick made that breakup, I seen the whole defensive sideline trying to run out there and congratulate him. Obviously, they had to get ready for the next play, but it's just the energy here is just amazing. And I can't wait to start the season off.
Well, there you go. Again, we can be great, we can be good. Now, I will say this, and we have great chat. Again, we simulcast all our shows on Facebook, YouTube, and Periscope. lots of conversation happening. A lot of the conversation around guys, the fact that this team, it had a lot of holes. You go 4-12, you clearly have a lot of holes.
Yeah.
But that you can fill those quickly. Now, you don't go from 4-12 to 12-4 very rarely. I mean, it's happened maybe twice. But you can get better. So I think fans have to temper their expectations. We keep saying this team will be better. How much better, we don't know.
Yeah, and I've said it before, and I mean, it's the way I look at it. This season's not really about the record as much as it is, finding out, is David Carr our quarterback going forth?
Derek.
No, they say David, yeah.
It happens, brother.
Yeah, especially this early in the morning. But it's like they can make a lot of steps forward and it not show up in the win-loss category, and I think that's the most important thing to people look at. Growth is more important than actual wins this season.
Right.
Yeah, and you want to win always, right, Chaz? But at the same time, that growth is exactly what you want to see. You just want to see them progress to the point where now you say after this next season, they have a lot less holes. They can go out and plug a few people in, and then you're a playoff team.
Right. Tahir Whitehead, I think, was talking about how it was kind of a revolving door last year, players coming in and out, and it's hard to get a grasp of the system when you're not playing along the same guy, and you're not getting that feel when you've got the same guys around you, and you're talking. Whitehead was I don't know if it was Burfict or Whitehead talking about how they're both taking on the responsibility, and they're he can call out one thing and he can call out another thing, and they now they're all on the same page. And so the growth, and now we're talking about all the the players they could fit in different spots. So I think this is going to be more of a growth year, like you said, just figuring out where people play best, and then moving forward with that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I just want to give the three observations that I've had really with OTAs. My three big takeaways is Burfict, his leadership role, his mentor, his level of maturity. Will that carry over on the field? Will he let up? I mean, you want him to be mean and nasty, but you don't want him to get suspended. So that's one of the questions. The other thing that I've seen is I think this offense could be very special. There's a caveat to that because my third point backs this one up. But with Antonio Brown, with Terrell Williams, they both seem to be clicking with Derek Carr. Then you have Josh Jacobs, very liked the locker room. You have a lot of veterans talking good about him again. It's going to be all positive at this point. Derek Carr also. They all seem to be gelling together. Now, the caveat to that is my other big takeaway from OTAs is, will this offensive line enable that offense to be good and maybe even special? To me, that is the big question. You now have Richie Incognito in there. You have Trent Brown on the other side. You have Colton Miller, who has to make a massive step up, guys, if this team's going to be good.
Yeah, and I think the Incognito signing shows that I'm not going to say that they're worried about Miller, but they realize how important it is. So they're getting a veteran who's had a long track record next to him to help him out as much as they can.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, we have our good friend Wally on the line. Wally from Henderson. How you doing, buddy? What's going on today?
Wally.
Hey, you guys didn't say anything about his best movie.
About Tooz's best movie?
Matuszak.
Yeah, One Man Force? Which one?
Caveman.
Caveman.
Yeah.
With Ringo Starr.
Remember he was Tonda?
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
Zug Zug Landa.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about that movie. We're gonna talk about a bunch with Steve Delsohn after this break, Wally. I mean, it's gonna be a good segment. The Tooz was just a larger-than-life guy, and exploring him for the rest of this next hour is going to be fascinating. What do you remember most about him on the field?
Oh, he was just a total badass. Like you said, he'd get suspended the first quarter of the first game these days.
Yeah, no, he would be. And
but
then
if you want some good stories, there's two books you should read. One's called The Snake,
Yep.
and another one's called Badasses.
Yes, I've read
They're
both.
both excellent books, and they got some great stories of Snabler and him in the hot tub with a bunch of chicks. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, and we had the author of Badass on last summer, and we'll get him on again because we didn't obviously get to hit all the stories, so we'll get him on again. But always good. Wally, man, thanks for calling as always. Have a great week, buddy.
All right, later.
All right. Well, there you go. So Wally, I mean, that's the thing. You talk about those old Raiders, and it's going to be fun the rest of this hour talking about the life and times of John Matuszak, guys. And you talk about the movies and you talk about his attitude. And Kelly, you were talking about him being on David Letterman in 1982. I just don't see personalities like that anymore.
It's they kind of try to sanitize the guys a lot because they want it to be the family, a little more family friendly. They want it, the NFL's got an image issue with a lot of the players and stuff, and they're trying as hard as they can to stamp out stuff like that. So yeah, you won't see stuff like that, especially with like social media and everything, where we find out about everything anybody does. It's a bygone era, man.
It is, and we're going to explore that with Steve Delsohn. Steve is just an amazing journalist. Outside the Lines, if you've watched that show, he won a Peabody Award for a series on the concussion issue in the NFL. So we're going to talk to Steve Delsohn right after this break coming up about John Matuszak. We're cruising with the Tooz next here on Silver and Black on CBS Sports Radio, 1140.
CBS Sports Radio.
This is Cliff Branch, former of the Oakland Raiders, 3-time Super Bowl champ, 4-time Pro Bowl, and you listen to the Silver and Black Show.
Indeed you are. Number 21, bringing us back in here on the 9th of June. And in just another week, it will have been 30 years since the passing of the infamous and great John Matuszak. Of course, Raiders won 2 Super Bowls with the Raiders in 77 and 81. And a larger-than-life figure. And we're going to talk about him for the remainder of this hour. Just a fascinating story. And we are joined now by someone who knows him very well, because Steve Delsohn, of course, co-author of more than a half dozen books, including Jim Brown's biography, Out of Bounds, a book on the Bears, and one that I love because Steve and I are both originally from Chicago, Talking Irish, the Oral History of the Notre Dame Football. That's a good one for me as well. But Steve is a Peabody Award winner of ESPN for Outside the Lines on the concussion crisis. Go watch it. You can find it up online. He's now the president of Delsohn Strategies and an Emmy Award nominee for his series on the Penn State football crisis as well. You can check him out at Delsohn. That's DELSOHN.com. But the reason we're talking to him is because he co-authored Cruisin' with the Tooz, in 1985, John Matuszak's autobiography, and we go now to Los Angeles and welcome Steve in. How you doing this morning, Steve?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
Hey, Steve.
Doing fantastic. Just a fascinating subject to talk about, of course, John Matuszak and his life and times, and you have a lot of stories, which were some in the book, some not in the book, of course. But before we explore that and explore him as a person, as a player, including his childhood and his career, how did you come to be the co-author of his autobiography?
There was a guy named Joe Weider who had founded a magazine called Muscle and Fitness.
Yeah,
and it was kind of legendary among people that worked out. He was the person who discovered Arnold Schwarzenegger, I think, mostly. And Joe had a magazine, like I said, Muscle and Fitness. He was starting a new magazine. I helped him start a new magazine. He wanted to kind of combine weightlifting with mainstream sports. And the magazine was called Sports Fitness back then. It later morphed into Men's Fitness, which is more of a fitnessy magazine. But back then it was pretty hardcore sports / weightlifting. And we did a cover piece on Matuszak, and I was the writer. And we got to know each other a little bit, and he mentioned that he was thinking of doing a book, and that led to me becoming his co-author.
Oh, nice. Yeah, fascinating. I mean, that's so many things like that, I think. Obviously, you're a talented journalist and writer, Steve, so it wouldn't be surprising to have someone come to you and help them write a book. With Matuszak, I want to explore, because you spent a lot of time with him, you look at his childhood and how that may have led to the man he became, including the kind of outrageous stuff. But he was a tall beanpole kind of kid, bulked up, played football. His upbringing in Wisconsin, suburban Milwaukee, of course, he lost 2 brothers to cystic fibrosis at an early age, living in Oak Creek, Wisconsin. I'm sure you didn't dwell on that a lot with him, but when you talked to him about that, how much did that early life of his contribute to the man he would become and the Tooz persona that we know today?
Oh, I think a lot. I think anybody's childhood is formative. And his father was a former Marine, not real talkative with John, kind of a taciturn guy. John felt that the only time he talked to him, for the most part, was if he had screwed something up. Oh. There wasn't a lot of verbal affection. He was close with his mother. She was kind of his best friend, his anchor, I think, growing up. But as you mentioned, he lost 2 little brothers to cystic fibrosis, which was devastating for the entire family. I think it's hard to figure out the human mind, but for anybody, and Matuszak was a complicated person, but I wouldn't be shocked if he felt some survivor's guilt. I lost my little brothers. Why am I here? I think he was damaged by that, as was his entire family. I was looking at the book again over the weekend, and I was struck by how tall and skinny he was in high school. And, he hadn't really filled out yet. He looked kind of gangly and awkward. And I think there were kids that made fun of him. Bullying is part of probably most kids' lives, but that doesn't make it any less, painful at the time.
Oh, sure.
And then he started to fill out. He became a football star in high school. He's also a star in basketball in the shot put. A lot of people don't realize, I think, that he was that good an athlete across the board. But that started to become his identity. He was the star athlete. He was already tall. He started to get muscular, and he was bigger than everybody else. And I think from a fairly, the legend of the Tooz kind of got cemented when he was in the NFL, but I think even from high school, college on, he started to become this larger-than-life figure to a lot of people.
Yeah,
and I think he tried to live up to that, also, which was part of the problem.
Sure. Again, we're talking to Steve Delsohn, who was the co-author of the book Cruisin' with the Tooz, the autobiography of John Matuszak, who passed away 30 years ago next week, partly due to an overdose of prescription medications. And you talked about his childhood. Just one thing, to show you, because one thing you hear about John Matuszak, before we jump into the football piece, is that, deep down under that exterior, he really, number one, cared about kids. And you can understand that, losing two young brothers. But when he was 12 or 13, his two-year-old brother dies, and he took it upon himself to buy shoes for his baby brother to be buried in, because he heard his mother crying that her son's feet had gotten swollen when he died. And those types of things, stick with a guy, and you try, especially if you look at the 70s and 80s. Today men are told to share feelings and all that. Back then, that wasn't necessarily the case. So Matuszak, coming out of that childhood, then goes off to the University of Missouri because he's now a football star in high school. He gets in trouble off the field, Steve. Then he transfers to the University of Tampa, becomes the first pick in the NFL draft, the 73 draft. But he kind of bounces around. It's not, I don't think, an exaggeration to say he was a bust, considered where he was drafted. So Al Davis signs him in Oakland. Was that just the match made in heaven that allowed him to kind of live out that persona and to become that larger-than-life figure?
Yeah, but let's back up for a second, because there's a couple interesting things. He went to the Houston Oilers. He was the first pick in the entire draft, as you said, and they were just a train wreck. They were a horrible team. They had a lot of dissension internally. Sid Gilman was this old-school NFL guy who became the coach after John got there, and he didn't care for Matuszak at all. There was a strike going on. The NFLPA was on strike, and Sports Illustrated at a certain point took a photograph of Matuszak holding up a sign that said something like, I forgot the words, but it would refer to the strike, and he had like a fist up in the air. And so he was suddenly perceived as kind of this radical guy, which he was radical in certain ways, but he wasn't really radical politically.
Right.
Again, middle-class kid from Milwaukee, son of a Marine. So he jumped from the Houston Oilers to the World Football League, which was this fledgling league. And I think he played like literally 7 plays. And then there were a bunch of cops on the sidelines that served him with a subpoena that had been sent there by the Houston Oilers. And then he went over to Kansas City, where he almost died one night of an overdose. He was taking downers and drinking. Paul Wiggins, the head coach of the Chiefs, rode with him in the ambulance and reportedly was pounding on Matuszak's chest at one point because it looked like Matuszak had stopped breathing. By the time he got to and then they traded him to the Redskins, he lasted, I think, a month. By the time he got to the Raiders, he was on his way out of the league. And he wasn't just a bust. He would have gone down in history as probably one of the all-time, busts in NFL history. From first-round draft pick to 3 or 4 years into his career, he's on his way out of the league, probably going to play in the Canadian Football League. And then Al Davis, who owned the Raiders at the time, signed Matuszak after first doing a little bit of due diligence. I think he talked to Ted Hendricks, the legendary linebacker for the Raiders, and asked him about Matuszak. And I think Hendricks looked around, at the locker room, which had a lot of characters in it, and said something like, what's one more?
Well, and Steve, we're gonna go to a break here in a few minutes. But you mentioned the story about the Chiefs. That same night, his wife tried to run him over with a car, if I recall, and then he fled to a cemetery, hid behind a gravestone, and then he made up with his wife or girlfriend or whatever it was at the time, and then he got into trouble. And you're right, his coach in Kansas City basically got him to the hospital and saved his life. We're going to pick it up after the break with some more stories. We're talking to Steve Delsohn, author of Cruising with the Tooz, the autobiography of John Matuszak. So don't go anywhere. You're listening to the Silver and Black today here on CBS Sports Radio 1140.
This is Tony Cardasco. Join me at Moneyline Sports Bar and Book at Park MGM for the NHL Stanley Cup playoffs and NBA Finals. Every game is televised live on dozens of TVs. Enjoy great food, beer, and drink specials during each game. Eat, drink, and bet. The best place to watch NBA and NHL postseason is Moneyline Sports Bar and Book at Park MGM.
Triple-digit temperatures mean it's pool and lake season. This is Las Vegas Fire Chief William McDonald reminding you to stay safe around water at all times with a few helpful tips for the season. Select a designated diver, someone to post watch over everyone having fun at the pool to ensure that there's always someone on the lookout. Together, we can make this a summer of safety, brought to you by these fine sponsors.
City of Las Vegas Fire and Rescue, Dignity Health, St. Rose Dominican Hospitals, and Southern Nevada Toyota dealers.
Hi, folks. Jim Peterson with Peterson Dean. I was driving to work this morning and I heard a radio ad from this newly formed solar and ledge roofing company. I get a kick out of it. I've got socks in my drawer that are older than some of these roofing and solar power companies. I started in roofing in 1980 when Jimmy Carter was in the White House. I built over 1,600,000 roofs, many hundreds of thousands of solar power systems. I've got the best financing in the United States. Look, my roof started $59 a month. These are 50-year warranted roofs. My solar power system starts as low as $49 a month. Same as cash for 2 years. I won't be beat. I've got the most experience. I've built more than anybody else. I buy better than anybody else, and I've got the best financing anywhere in the United States. And I've just been around longer. Give me a call if you want a roof, solar, or a backup home battery right now. 888-277-1933. 888-277-1933 or at petersondean.com. 888-277-1933. Once again, 888-277-1933.
NCSB numbers 0082933, 059339, 090948.
Dear movers and shakers, we know how you roll, and we're with you. We're with you on the tarmac or terrain. In the 2019 RAV4 Adventure, Limited, and Hybrid models. We're with you in the comfy Highlander with seating for up to 8 and advanced safety features standard. We're with you in the sharp 2019 Toyota Camry with its available cockpit red leather seats. And we're with you in the all-new 2020 Toyota Corolla, loaded with attitude and the latest tech. We're with you. Let's go, Toyota. Find yours at toyota.com. Toyota, let's go places.
No one ever says you're a bad person if you have cancer. No one says it's your fault for having autism or Alzheimer's. So why should having an opioid addiction be any different? When we shame the sick, it keeps them from seeking treatment. Addiction is a disease, and it's up to us to stop the stigma. See how you can reduce the stigma at endopioidresponse.org. This message funded by a grant through the Nevada Department of Health and Human Services, aired in cooperation with the Nevada Broadcasters Association and this station.
Being in the Army National Guard is about more than serving your country. It's about being there for your community when your neighbors need you most. The Army National Guard makes college affordable, and serving part-time can help you graduate debt-free. Do you want to stay close to friends and family? The Guard allows you to serve close to home. Serving part-time in the Army National Guard lets you have the life you want. Learn more by visiting
National Guard, aired by the Nevada Broadcasters Association and this station.
The Dodgers take on the Giants today at noon on CBS Sports Radio 1140.
The only way to take Silver and Black today with you is with a radio.com app. Download it today and search CBS Sports Radio 1140 in Las Vegas and listen to us anytime, anywhere.
Welcome back to Silver and Black Today. We're speaking with Steve Delsohn, who wrote the book Cruisin' with the Tooz, the autobiography of John Matuszak, and we're talking about the fascinating character that was John Matuszak on almost the 30th anniversary of his untimely passing. Now, Steve, when we look at John Matuszak, the football player, of course, he had those great years in Oakland, 77, 81, 2 Super Bowl rings, but he never quite could sustain it. Was that directly due to that off-the-field trouble, the abuse of alcohol, of drugs, and did he leave a lot on the table that he could have really turned himself into one of the better players of the game?
Yeah, I mean, I think there were a lot of things. He had some legitimate, serious injuries, which can happen to anyone and did happen to pretty much anyone, played in the NFL. But definitely his behavior off the field, staying up all night, showing up at practice, probably was still alcohol in his blood. That probably happened all the time. There's no way, that couldn't have had an effect on his performance, in my opinion. But, there were a lot of guys on the Raiders, and that doesn't justify John's behavior, but it was absolutely part of the culture on that particular team. At that particular time, you had Kenny Stabler, whose famous line was, used to read the playbook by the light of the jukebox, I think.
Yep.
He probably said it more artfully, but all those guys, Phil Villapiano, Hendricks, it was a really hard drinking team. And in some ways, it was a good place for Matuszak because Al Davis and John Madden allowed the players to be individuals. They weren't hung up on having a million rules. But it was also a hard partying team. And, that probably contributed to Matuszak's drinking, although I got to say, at that point in his life, it probably wouldn't have mattered what team he was on.
Yeah.
He was a wild guy. He had a self-destructive streak, clearly. And I think, like I said earlier, as his legend grew, he wanted to be the biggest and the baddest. I went out drinking with him one time. I wasn't drinking. I thought we were working, actually. But I saw a side of him that kind of shocked me a little bit at the time. Because when I was working with him, he seemed like his head was in a good place. And we spent a fair amount of time. You get together a couple times a week, typically, with somebody when you're writing a book, and you turn on your tape recorder and do the interviews. And I only saw him party once over that entire period of time. I don't know what he was doing when I wasn't with him, but when I was around him, he seemed like he was healthy, seemed to be in a pretty good place emotionally. But we went to this legendary bar in Hollywood, Imperial Gardens. They have sushi and sake. And I had my tape recorder. I realized a few minutes in, we probably weren't going to get any work done. And he ordered sake, and most people would order one drink at a time, and he ordered 16 little cups of sake.
Oh my gosh, 16!
Now they were little cups, but there were 16 little cups, and I don't think I had any of it, and he drank it all, and I forgot how long it took, but I think it didn't take that long, and suddenly, I don't remember exactly how this started, but there was a man and his wife were kind of arguing at the bar. And it was not a loud argument, but they were arguing. And Matuszak stood up and started lecturing the guy. who didn't like it, obviously, but, he was Matuszak. And then I don't remember if I went to the bathroom or what happened, but I took my eyes off Matuszak for a minute, and the next thing I knew, he was kind of standing up in one of the open spaces, like between the bar and where the restaurant tables were, and he was doing karate moves. And first of all, you realize when a guy that big is doing karate, like how much ground he covers. But it was scary, and he knew some karate, and he was blitzed basically. And what struck me at that moment, that night, was you've ever seen people who just at a certain point when they're drinking, they almost become another person entirely. It's almost like a switch goes on.
Yep. And
you just don't recognize that person anymore. That's what happened with Matuszak that night.
And that seems to be a common theme. Now, we have a couple minutes left, Steve, and I know we could probably go on for 2 hours talking about the time you spent with him because such a colorful guy. But the end of John Matuszak, of course, we all know what happened with the drug-induced heart attack and overdose and all of that. Was this going to be the ending? I mean, John tried to stay clean. The longest he could go was 89 days. Was this something that was going to happen probably no matter what?
It's surprising, honestly, that he lived as long as he did because he was so wild. He didn't do well with leaving football, even though he had a good career in Hollywood. That was part of the tragedy of it. He did have something going on in his life. But he just struggled so much with self-control. I don't know if, the other thing too is we weren't talking about CTE back in those days.
Right. Exactly.
And I have no clue, the condition of his brain, but he played a lot of football for a lot of years. He probably had some brain damage to some degree. I think every single ex-football player does. They may not have CTE, but they probably have some long-term brain damage.
Right, and Steve, we're coming up on a hard out here, but and of course you won your Peabody Award for part of a series on Outside the Lines about the concussion crisis, and of course we'll never know with John Matuszak because he's gone, and this is before players knew what was going on and could donate their brains for study as well. So, Steve, we appreciate you being on. Make sure you visit Delsohn, DELSOHN.com, where you can hear more about what Steve is doing now. Does great work consulting. Steve, thanks for joining us and getting everybody up to speed on what it was like to be around John Matuszak.
You're very welcome. I appreciate you guys having me on.
Thanks, Steve.
Right.
Thanks, Steve.
Steve Delsohn. We're going to step aside when we come back after the top of the hour sports update. We'll talk a little more about John Matuszak and the Raider mystique and all those bad boys and what happened back in the day. You are listening to the Silver and Black Today here on CBS Sports Radio 1140.
This is Tony Cardasco. Join me at Moneyline Sports Bar and Book at Park MGM for the NHL Stanley Cup playoffs and NBA Finals. Every game is televised live on dozens of TV.
The only way you can take CBS Sports Radio 1140 with you is with the radio.com app. Download it today and listen to us anytime, anywhere. You found the most in-depth coverage of the Silver and Black. The nation and the league arrive in Las Vegas in 2020. Live from the CBS Sports Radio 1140 studios, it's Silver and Black Today. Join the conversation by calling 702-889-5978. And now, here's your host, Scott Gobranson.
Welcome back. Happy Sunday, everybody. You're listening to Silver and Black Today here on CBS Sports Radio, emanating from the future home of your Raiders, Las Vegas, Nevada. Big thanks to Steve Delsohn, of course, the author who wrote the autobiography, co-wrote the autobiography of John Matuszak with the Tooz, cruising with the Tooz to be exact. Fascinating discussion. We of course couldn't get to all of it with him because there's just so much. I mean, not only was Matuszak a colorful guy, but the stories and the legacy, if you will, if you want to call it that, of the player, of the man off the field is pretty remarkable. And we want to continue that conversation here with Kelly Kreiner, Chaz Osborne, my co-host, and myself a little bit. And guys, you know, Steve talked about, the question I asked him about was this going to be the ending for John Matuszak no matter what? The drugs, the alcohol, the partying, combined with the injuries he sustained playing football, especially to his back, was that going to be his end? Was it always going to be a fast, quick, young end? He died at 38 years of age in 1989 in Los Angeles. And that seemed to be, now Steve said that he should have probably died earlier because of how hard he partied. My question for you guys on this one is, and knowing he talked about Stabler, he talked about Villapiana, who we've had on our show many times, a great guy. The way those guys, as hard as they went, could that, I mean, I don't think you could even do 25% of what they did then off the field now in the NFL. Could you? I mean, you couldn't.
Oh, no. Yeah, with the way social media and everything is, everything would be, it'd be all over the place. The NFL would be on everybody. You know, you'd be headlining SportsCenter, Fox News all the time. I mean, it would be a circus. You know, back in the day, there wasn't as much media going around, and the media would cover for those guys, too. It's like you see all the stuff that he got caught up in. Think of how much stuff never reached anything because it got buried.
Yeah, and there'd be so many more suspensions and those kind of things now with all the new rules. And you know, he talked about, you know, how they played back then. They actually changed a lot of the rules nowadays because of the way those guys played back in the day. So it is unfortunate his ending.
Real name.
You know, his childhood and younger drug problems, and unfortunately that probably was the only way that it was going to end. And you know, he was a polarizing figure, and that's one thing we didn't want to see. No, well, and again, you know, the thing about reading everything I could about John Matuszak in preparation for the show, you know, you see a guy who, with children, was phenomenal. I mean, he would go to children's hospitals, obviously from his own experience in losing his two brothers and then later his sister to cystic fibrosis. Here was a man who was very caring, and just people said when he got around kids, he was so attentive to them and just, you know, a different person. And so I think you always have to put it into context. As much as we hear about the partying and all that stuff, you know, there's more of a human being than just that persona, than the actor, than the football player. And I think it's important that we represent that. And that's one of the reasons we want to talk about it with Steve as well. And we have a caller on the line now, Audrey, who wants to talk about John Matuszak. Audrey, welcome to Silver and Black Today.
Thank you, and thank you for the lovely things you're saying. I hope you know the good side of John like I did. I'm going to cry. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to do that.
That's okay.
My son loved children. He was a good guy. There were two Johns, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I love my son with all my heart.
Well, Miss Matuszak, I want to thank you for calling in, and I know those wounds. Being a father of 5 children myself, I know and my wife lost her sister when she was young, and her parents. When you lose a child, doesn't matter what age, you don't ever. It doesn't go away. It's always with you. And I was honored to learn about your son and to know about the good things that he had done too, because we hear a lot about, of course, the persona, right, the Tooz, but the story about one of your sons passing and him buying the shoes and all of that. It shows the heart. It shows.
I've got to tell you another good story.
Okay, great.
He told his sister that had cystic fibrosis that if he made it big in the NFL or any place, he would send her anywhere in the world, and if he didn't, he was going to take her to a little park to play. And when she turned 16, my other daughter, Karen, was married and lived in Panama, and he sent Dawn because she wanted to go to Panama to see her sister.
Wow. Well, and go ahead. Sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, your son, and again, in reading about him and upbringing and what you all went through as a family, was it hard for him as he got older? Was having lost his brothers and then his sister, was that something that maybe?
No, his sister died after
he passed. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So when his brothers passed both at very early ages, of course.
Well, he was so disappointed because the first boy, Christopher, was a twin to my daughter, Christine, and he felt gypped because he wanted a little brother so bad.
Yeah. Wow. And is that something that you think, was it something that the pain from that I know you and your whole family dealt with, was the pain from that something that you feel contributed to him masking it with those things like alcohol and whatnot?
Most definitely. John would walk into a room, I swear to you, and it was like he took over the room. He was like a magnet. But when he was bad, he was really, really bad. And I think it was because in his mind, he's always like, why am I still alive? And they're not.
Yeah.
It really bothered him a lot. And I don't know
how close he was to the niece.
And even his nieces and nephews, he'd have his niece and his 2 nephews out and, about buying toys, doing something with them. And somebody would say, hey, John, are those your kids? He said, you bet. He never said they were his nephews and niece. And he adored them all. And he just brought them out to California. They did things together. He loved his sisters, And there's so many good parts of him that you can't explain it because people see this. And he had this society. He had to be a raider. He had to be tough. He had to, It was a part of his. It was part of his show. Yeah.
Well, and he was. I mean, as a football player, as an actor, of course, an entertainer, and so I understand that. But today, I think that we live in a different time, right, where men's mental health is still an issue. But to be able to deal with those issues, it's unfortunate that he wasn't able to. But we wanted to make sure that we remembered some of those positive things as well, and we certainly appreciate you calling in to share those.
I appreciate your story. I love it. I'm not complaining about any of it.
Oh, no.
It's true.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate that, Ms. Matuszak, and I would love if you could, David, our engineer, will, as I say goodbye to you, I just want to get your number if that's okay with you, because I'd like to call you because we want to do a story for our website too about John, and I'd love to talk to you a little bit more in depth on that for that.
Are you asking my mom for her phone number? This is Karen, her daughter.
Hi, Karen. Hi. Yeah, we will. I'll put you on the line with our engineer, and if there's just a way to contact her, that would be great. Whatever you're comfortable with, we appreciate it.
Okay, sure, that's fine.
Okay, thank you guys for calling in. Please give your mother my best.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, there you have it. A surprise guest, Audrey Matuszak, John Matuszak's mother.
It's powerful stuff.
It was, and she was obviously listening to the show and listening to Steve Delsohn come on and talk about that. But again, as I was saying, there's more to a man than just the explosive and the mistakes. We all make mistakes. We all do things, but there's two sides to every person.
Like
but
she said,
it's pretty
he's
powerful.
trying to live up to that Raiders mystique himself, and so he only wants to show that tough guy side.
Yeah.
You know, and behind the scenes, you know, he's doing a lot of great things with kids, like we talked about. You know, and she did talk about, you know, his survivor's guilt, what Steve Delsohn was talking about as well.
Mm-hmm. And Kelly, I mean, you the first time I've ever had somebody's mother call in, but you know, Audrey Matuszak, a mother who lost 4 children.
I was gonna say,
different
yeah,
ages.
it's not just that it was John. It was all 4, and it's also how, you know, cystic fibrosis is not something. I mean, that's very tough to bring up kids like that, and then to see the one, you know, John was like the one that didn't have the affliction, but he had other issues like, you know, the addiction, everything like that.
Yep.
Take him so young. I mean, it's just brutal.
Well, and that's the key. I mean, again, and I want to thank Audrey Matuszak for listening to the show and being happy with how we were talking about John, because his story is a mixed bag. I mean, there's bad things, and she recognized them, but she wanted to come on the show and just talk about the good side of that, and we want to recognize that too, as well. And that goes for all these Raiders. You know, Lyle Alzado, of course, Ken Stabler, we know a lot about, and Phil Villapiana, who we've had come on, who, you know, has had a beautiful family, beautiful kids, and so just fascinating to explore that. This show has turned very interesting, and we appreciate that.
And you said it's a mixed bag, but more often than not, it's the bad stuff that you hear about with guys like this, because that's more interesting for people. You know, it's like they want to hear about, because people love to tear people down and then build them back up. That's the American way.
Absolutely.
It's like if we build you up, make you famous or something, we destroy you, and then we can't wait for that comeback.
Yep.
Yes, well, I know, and us being on the radio, we get lots of people who have nice things to say.
Unfortunately, John didn't get that comeback.
We're going to step aside. When we come back, we're going to talk Kelly's Corner, Canada. You're listening to Silver and Black today here on CBS Sports Radio 1140.
Poser.
Dodgers take on the Giants. Today at noon on CBS Sports Radio, 1140.
You found the most in-depth coverage of the Silver and Black. This is Silver and Black Today, live on CBS Sports Radio 1140. Here's your host, Scott Gobranson.
So one of the things that we at the Raiders take seriously is that the Raiders is a global brand. And for us, we're proud to have a strong international fan presence that we've seen firsthand when we've done these games in places like London and Mexico City and Barcelona years ago. So with this game, this year, we'll become the first NFL team to play games in 3 different countries in one season.
The last time I was in Winnipeg, I was catching my breath looking for a oxygen tank on the sideline when I was playing with the Alouettes in 1980. So it's glad to see that there's a new stadium here in town rather than the old place that I played in and coached with the Stampeders and played with the Alouettes. And it's good to have the Raiders come here because I believe, knowing the CFL fans as I do for a number of years I was here, how gracious they are, how sports-minded they are, number one. They love their sports, and it's good to be able to see 2 teams that have a great history throughout their careers as organizations with Green Bay and the Raiders, and knowing that somebody like Mr. Davis from years ago, who is legendary, as we all know, it's too bad he couldn't be here because he would love it also. But I just want to say thank you for having the team here. I think the fans are really going to enjoy it. It'll bring the NFL to Canada, and especially to Western Canada. So we'll have a great game. And it's good to see everybody, and thank you for being here.
All right, the great Fred Biletnikoff there from Winnipeg, as also Dan Ventrell from the Raiders organization to top it off, as that clip brought us back in from the break. You're listening to Silver and Black Today here on CBS Sports Radio 1140. Again, just a thank you to Audrey Matuszak for calling in, John's mom, who was listening to the interview with Steve Delsohn. We appreciate her doing that. Now, the Raiders playing in Canada happens to be the subject of Mr. Kelly Kreiner's weekly segment, which we call Kelly's Corner, and I'm sure he'll have something interesting to say about it. Kelly, Winnipeg, what about the Raiders playing up there?
First off, let me say I have nothing against Canada because I can kind of see where
Canada.
Yeah, I can kind of see where this is going to go already. And I will try to make this the last time I complain about the Raiders' schedule all year.
How can you
but
not?
You have a team that has such a history in Oakland like you have, and now you're taking yet another football game away from the fans.
Right.
Now, I get it. It's a preseason game, not the biggest draw. You know, when I had my NFL season tickets, I would give those tickets. Actually, I would donate those to charity so I could get the tax write-off for the full face value of the tickets. But it's one less chance these people have to see their football team. You know, preseason games are great for families because you can go on the secondary market, get a lot cheaper tickets because people aren't selling them. It's a chance that one less chance that that somebody with a big family or something like that wouldn't be able to afford to go to a regular game to go to a game, and it's getting snatched away. Well, you lose the London game also, a regular season game. It's like the last game of the season is not in Oakland.
Well, and the thing, and I don't disagree with you at all. I agree. I think, number one, the fan so many times gets screwed. Like, you know, especially for Oakland fans who the team's leaving after this year, and so those are precious home games. At the same time, this is sort of the Raiders. You have the Raiders up there with Dan Ventrell and Fred Biletnikoff putting up a good face, right, for this, because we all know that these international games, it's sort of like they're taking medicine with some sugar in it, right? Because in order for them to get the approval to move to Las Vegas, guys, they had to agree to these international games and to do more of them than other teams do. So in the long run, fan gets screwed, especially the Oakland fan, let's face it.
Yep.
But long term, that was part of the deal. But again, the fan gets screwed right? There's just no other way about it.
Yeah, and you talk about wanting to grow the brand, make it a global brand. Yeah, here's a good idea. Let's send a preseason game where nobody who anybody cares about is going to be playing football and show these fans what mediocre crap football looks like to really get them interested in football.
Right.
I know I'll earn some scoring for this, but they watch Canadian football, so maybe they're used to it.
Oh.
Hey, man. CFL, longer field, wider field.
The Rouge.
I will,
the Rouge.
I will take Canadian football over preseason NFL
That's
football.
true.
Well, yeah, if it's regular season CFL, yeah, because they're playing for something versus.
And Canada doesn't. I don't think they have a preseason.
No, they
CFL.
don't. No,
Yeah.
they're smart, but they don't have the players union we have.
But
So-
why Winnipeg? I don't understand that they're
Yeah.
saying that Winnipeg is west. They could have gone Calgary, Vancouver. Is it just because Winnipeg has that new stadium for the Blue Bombers, or what was the thinking behind that?
I think it's because of that, but I don't know. The entertainment group that planned this event, which has planned other games, including games that the Raiders have been involved in London and so on, that's the venue they chose. It's a good question. I don't
Cash
know.
grab.
Yeah, Winnipeg paid the most. I don't know.
David just said it's $130 US starting out for tickets for that.
Wow,
That's
for a preseason
yeah.
game.
A preseason game in Oakland, you could get seats for $15. I'm
Right.
sure.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So that again, though, but will the fans in Canada? It'd be interesting to hear from folks if you're from Canada or in Canada, and you're listening and you're a Raider fan.
And that's the thing for them; they don't really care that it's a preseason game because it's their one chance to see it.
Yeah.
So it's like if you go to a play, like if you go to see Hamilton, but you're seeing the understudies, you're still seeing Hamilton, and it's your chance to see it. You know, it's like you're seeing the understudies in a preseason football game, but it's your one chance to see it. So it's like you have no choice.
It was pretty amazing last year in London how many fans showed up, and they were fans of all teams. But I didn't think just being overseas like that there would be that many football fans. But it, like you said, it's just an event. It's something for them to go see and do.
And and that's the thing when they talk about the crowds that show up to these games in London. It was like, well, yeah, but you only got one to sell. You don't have 10.
Right.
Put 10 over there, see what happens.
Exactly.
Plus, you have real NFL teams over there. And my whole thing,
During
I
the
said,
real
with,
season.
with expansion, if you do a team in London, your team will never be good because the chances of getting free agents, getting college draft picks to want to play in London is a super uphill battle.
Yeah.
No, it is. But like you mentioned, the Hamilton example, people pay a lot of money to see a mediocre musical. So that made your point right there.
Hamilton was Hamilton was good.
It's overrated.
Wow.
Most overrated musical of the last 25 years.
It's
Wow.
not the
Easy.
It's not the best music. I mean, it does get that. It was a very good show.
To each his own.
To each.
I mean, it's no Book of Mormon, which if you haven't seen it, the Book of Mormon was excellent. I'm trying to think of other stuff. Yeah, that.
Okay, now we've devolved.
show's
Yeah, we've
kind of in the
devolved
wrong
into
direction.
Do we want to talk about musicals? All musicals?
Surprisingly, I'm not usually a musical fan. But
If
both
you
of
were,
those,
if you were to do a Raiders musical, I want to get callers on this 702-889-5978. If you were going to do a Raiders musical, like what kind of music would it be? Would it have to be heavy metal?
Phantom of the Opera.
So it would be opera, is what you're saying.
It would be dark.
It would be dark. Well, dark is one thing, but it'd be interesting. A Raider, hey, we might have just came up with an idea.
Well, if they're going to put a wedding chapel,
Oh, yes.
if they're
That's
going to have a
another thing.
Raiders wedding chapel.
Some breaking news this week, as a matter of fact. Our good friend Alan Snell over at lvsportsviz.com broke a story that he's been told by sources that the Raiders, if they close the deal on the Bally High golf course for parking, that they might have a Raiders-themed wedding chapel. And there's been the exploration of a Raiders cemetery.
What?
I just bring you the news that Alan's a good journalist. He said that. The other news was that I put out on Twitter is I have three good folks who've told me, who have knowledge of the situation, that Levy Restaurants will get the concession contract for the new Las Vegas Stadium. So you heard it here first. So that news is happening. But a Raiders-themed wedding chapel,
Put
guys.
it up on the poll. Let's see how many people would actually consider.
You would be surprised. It would be a huge, it would be a huge thing because especially it's an event type thing. Saturdays and Sundays of game weekend,
Right.
people would fly in for the games, and that's just another thing for them to
Right.
plan their whole thing around. If you're a Raider fan anywhere across the planet, it's like, we can go to Vegas, we can watch a game, we can get married.
Yeah.
It's just another thing to add to it. And I do have to say that when you mentioned the music, and Ice Cube wasn't the first thing that didn't come up for the. I mean,
Oh, no, we have folks online who are saying that.
Oh,
too,
yeah.
as well.
It's a given. It's Ice Cube's doing the.
Well, and not only that, but you talk about the wedding chapel. You would have to be married by a guy that looks like the logo, right, with the silver helmet and the eye patch.
Yep.
And there's people with swords, and you walk through the swords.
Sure.
And as you're walking down the aisle, there's no song for the bride. It's Raider, right?
Yep.
That's the whole thing.
Autumn Wind.
Or Autumn Wind.
Just
Oh,
get
nice.
married, baby.
Just get married, baby.
I'm thinking we get the old Violator to officiate a wedding or
Violator
two.
would
I'm
be
sure
good.
he'd probably be up for it.
Yeah, I'm
or
sure he
you
would
could
be
have
too.
you could have your choice of the black hole people, like in the themed weddings out here.
Darth Vader.
You could have Elvis or anything like that. You could have
Skulls, Darth
Oh, my
Vader,
God. Now,
Violator.
asking our viewers and listeners, would you guys get married? If you're not married, or if you were going to renew your vow, I think a vow renewal would be huge. Every
Yeah.
Raider fan that's already married coming here, would you get married at a Raiders-themed chapel in Las Vegas by the new stadium? Would that be part of your football weekend?
I've just got a bad joke in my head, man. It's like, if you're a Raider fan, that's the only way you're going to get a ring. Because that's I'm a diehard Cubs fan. Everybody knows that. And there was that Kevin Hart ring. It said the best thing about dating a Cubs fan is she's not looking for a ring. That's just the first thing that popped into my head when you said wedding chapel.
Yeah, and our good friend Ed Marshall in Alaska brings up a good point. He says that you don't want to put your anniversary date during football season because then.
Well, no, but if somebody's doing this, they're obviously a football fan too. So it's not like if you get the wife to agree to a Raider wedding, the last thing you got to worry about is football season. She's in.
You're
She's
right.
already in.
All right, we're up against another break. When we come back, we're going to talk with Jeremy Aguero from Applied Analysis and the Las Vegas Stadium Authority. He's going to give you the most in-depth update. Don't listen to the non-factual stuff out there. He's going to tell you where the stadium's at financially and otherwise here on Silver and Black today on CBS Sports Radio 1140.
Sports Radio.
Hi, this is Steve Wisniewski, and you're listening to the Silver and Black Today.
Welcome back to the Silver and Black Today here on CBS Sports Radio. And of course, every week we like to bring you some update on the Las Vegas Stadium and the happenings there for what is a transforming complex here in our city, and of course for the Raiders. And today we're just excited to be joined by Jeremy Aguero. Of course, he's the principal analyst at Applied Analysis. And if you watch the stadium meetings and you see who's running them, it's Jeremy. He's the voice. He's the guy who keeps it all on track, with all due respect to Chairman Steve Hill. Jeremy's very good at that, and we appreciate him coming on today with us. So, Jeremy, we just got through a couple weeks ago with the latest Stadium Advisory Board meeting. And the good news is things remain on time, on budget for completion. $805.5 million of the $1.8 billion has already been spent. And things look great. Talk about the overall health of where the project's at, especially from a financial standpoint when it comes to the new Las Vegas Stadium.
Well, look, I mean, I think you summed it up right. On budget, on time. And that's the best report I think we can expect to get. There are certainly some challenges that that the stadium has. That having been said, the developer, Stadco, who's the company that's developing the Raiders entity that's developing it, as well as their contractors, Mortensen and McCarthy, as well as a number of subcontractors, have just done an absolutely terrific job in facing every challenge that they've had in front of them and finding ways to make sure that the project stays on track.
Yeah, it's crazy, too. I mean, you look at the project funding already at 44% with that $805.5 million. And one of the numbers that struck out to me, I think, and one of the points that a lot of folks who, going back a couple of years, were very skeptical about, Jeremy, was this idea that they'd be able to sell these personal seat licenses. But you look at that revenue already at 98% of the $290 million budget. Has that surprised you how quickly that's gone?
Well, look, I think it surprised everybody because, I mean, we established a budget at $290 million, and clearly they're going to exceed that amount. So like you said, I mean, look, when you're starting a project, there is always some degree of skepticism. And I don't even know if it's skepticism as far as just being conservative. We have ideas, there's expectations, and you hope that you're able to achieve them. When we're able to actually surpass those, and that leads to the ability to actually enhance the stadium that's going to be constructed, I think that's not only good for the project, but great for our community.
And if we look at, of course, the project being funded by the hotel tax revenue here in Clark County, and for 6 straight months, this was above projection. This past March, it went a little bit below, but still overall for the project remains in the positive. When you look at the outlook for tourism and for the hotel tax revenue coming in, what do you look at long term? I mean, we go into the summer months. I know sometimes we see a dip there, and then again at the end of the year. What do you guys think about this little dip in April? No concerns whatsoever, correct?
Yeah, look, I mean, obviously we're keeping a close eye on the room tax. And the biggest concern we had, of course, was the ramifications of the events of 1 October, right? And what that really meant for our visitor volume. And what we've seen is once those started to dissipate a bit, that we started to see some of that growth. As you mentioned, we had 5 of the last 6 months. We've seen positive growth in room tax. That's terrific for us. And like you said, it was down last month, but the month before it was up in excess of 12%. So, you know, sometimes you just have things that happened in one month that maybe happened in the prior month, something along those lines. That type of variation is very much expected. In terms of looking at the summer months or looking, as you mentioned, obviously in December, things tend to slow down from time to time, or every year, I should say, but during those times of the year, it's a little slower than it is in other months. But of course, we're projecting against the same period of the prior year, and so, you know, hopefully we've adjusted for that. Right now, as you mentioned, the room tax is coming in almost exactly on expectations. You know, 2.5 years after those projections were originally made, And so we're very pleased with where it is at the moment. In addition to that, there's some important things on the horizon, not only the stadium itself coming online and its potential impacts on visitation, but a lot of convention space is currently in the pipeline, as well as new resorts like the Resorts World project. And historically, that type of new construction has pushed both visitor volume and room tax numbers up.
Absolutely. Again, we're speaking to Jeremy Aguero, a principal analyst with Applied Analysis, about the new Las Vegas stadium. And one of the things, too, that when SB1 was passed and the funding for the stadium was established, this debt waterfall, this debt reserve fund was set up to protect the public's interest. And again, a number that made me feel really good as someone living in Clark County was to look at this debt reserve in your last report of April 2019, already 57% funded at $51.2 million. In year number 2, that's at about 13.5% of where it needs to be for this year as far as funding. Talk about that debt reserve and how it works, Jeremy, because I get a lot of questions from our listeners and folks who read on the website about that, not quite understanding what its function is and how it works should it be needed.
Yeah, sure. It's a great question. So essentially, when the bonds are issued for the public's portion of the project, $750 million in total, there's a debt associated with that, and that debt has to be repaid over the next 30 years. As part of that, however, the way that it's structured is that there is a 2-year debt reserve. You said it exactly right. The first full year's reserve was already pre-funded. The second reserve is funded out of revenues as they come in. So revenues in excess of the debt service actually go and are used. The first use of any of those monies after the principal and the interest of the bonds is paid is to fully fund a full 2-year debt reserve, which would mean that room tax could essentially come in at zero for 2 years, and we would have enough money to fully pay the debt at the maximum amount of that debt for 2 full years. As you said, I mean, I think this should just be one of many reasons that the public has a great deal of confidence in the ability to repay these bonds. Not only are revenues coming in over expectations, not only is there a waterfall, but the conservative nature by which these bonds are structured puts the public in very good position in terms of ensuring that this debt will be repaid on time and without any instability in the financial situation of the stadium authority or the county that's backing the bonds.
Yeah, really remarkable. And again, a credit to how it was all legislated, of course, up in Carson City as this project started. And Jeremy, I had last week, we talked to Jonas Peterson, of course, from the LVGEA, who you're very familiar with. And he talked about not only we were looking ahead maybe and saying, well, geez, if there's a Super Bowl here, it could be a $1 billion economic impact on the area. But we also talked about already what we're seeing from an economic impact with the Raiders' impending move and the stadium project, and of course the Raiders facility in Henderson going up. You represent a lot of other folks too in the area in your business. Talk about what you're seeing from the economic upswing and the excitement building in Las Vegas as the Raiders prepare to move here in the next year.
Yeah, look, I mean, that's a big question, right? When you ask me about the economic impact, the first thing I'm going to say is all those folks that are showing up on that site, the construction workers that are working there, incredible number of men and women, now 1.5 million person hours that have worked on the construction of that. And look, I mean, we just think back what our community was going through 5 years ago in terms of how decimated our construction industry is and how important that industry is to our community. The first economic impact I'm going to point to is that labor and those remarkable men and women, because they're just doing a terrific job, and it's great to see them back to work. In addition to that, I think the other piece that you have to take a look at is, the Raiders are coming, and that is huge for our community. But that's not going to be the only thing that's going on in that stadium. Obviously, UNLV will play its games there, but this week there was also an announcement of bowl games that are coming to our community. A bowl game that we didn't have before with Pac-12 and SEC and Big Ten that will be there. That wouldn't have been possible but for the construction of this stadium stadium, a great work, accomplishment, if you will, by LVCVA, the stadium folks, and many others that have participated in that, which I think just, again, reflects the expectation and the benefits associated with having the stadium here. I mean, I think we all know folks from those conferences know how to travel, and so that'll not only fill the stadium, but fill hotel rooms.
Yeah.
And, I guess also it's been discussed is Mr. Foley having conversations about an MLS team being in there. Again, more activity that's taking place there. So we haven't even gotten to the point where the stadium is open, and it's already creating that type of excitement, that type of momentum, and literally millions of work hours of high-paying jobs that are going to those folks. Look, the long-term investment is what's really important to our community. That investment in terms of filling those hotel rooms, making sure that UNLV has a great place to play football, and really providing an amenity that didn't exist before for the 2.3 million people that live here. But thus far, I think it has been absolutely a reflection of promises kept by the Raiders.
No doubt about it, Jeremy. And I think also you look at all the other projects, you mentioned some of them and the possibilities. I don't want to put the cart before the horse, but you're right about MLS soccer. You're also hearing national buzz about baseball. That might be a longer-term thing, Major League Baseball. And, of course, we've seen how the Aviators in their new facility are leading AAA baseball in all of attendance, so people are excited. So you've had this sports renaissance, but then you look at things like the Sphere, right, being built now as well, which is going to be an incredible facility as well. And I really, truly believe that is all because of course, the Golden Knights came first, and then the Raiders decided to move here and create this project, which you are so close to. And it's just in a very, very exciting time for everybody here in Southern Nevada, and you are there at the forefront of it doing great work. Jeremy Aguero, thank you very much. I appreciate you joining us today.
Hey, no problem. Love the show. Thanks so much for having me.
There you have it, up to date on the latest with the Las Vegas Stadium. We're going to step aside, and we'll be back here on the Silver and Black today on CBS Sports Radio 1140.
Triple-digit temperatures mean it's pool and lake season. This is Las Vegas Fire Chief William McDonald reminding you to stay safe around water at all times with a few helpful tips for the season. Select a designated diver, someone to post watch over everyone having fun at the pool to ensure that there's always someone on the lookout. Together, we can make this a summer of safety, brought to you by these fine sponsors.
City of Las Vegas Fire and Rescue, Dignity Health, St. Rose Dominican Hospitals, and Southern Nevada Toyota dealers.
Dear movers and shakers, we know how you roll, and we're with you. We're with you on the tarmac or terrain. In the 2019 RAV4 Adventure, Limited, and Hybrid models. We're with you in the comfy Highlander with seating for up to 8 and advanced safety features standard. We're with you in the sharp 2019 Toyota Camry with its available cockpit red leather seats. And we're with you in the all-new 2020 Toyota Corolla, loaded with attitude and the latest tech. We're with you. Let's go, Toyota. Find yours at toyota.com.
Eleven 40.
This is Silver and Black Today, live on CBS Sports Radio 1140.
Welcome back to Silver and Black Today here on CBS Sports Radio 1140 in Las Vegas. Thank you again to our sponsors. Number one, the Laborers Local 872, the men and women building the Las Vegas Stadium. They are a longtime supporter, a big supporter of ours. We appreciate them and everyone inside the Local 872, what they do. Also, this show brought to you by Moneyline Sports Bar and Book at Park MGM, home of the NBA Finals and the NHL Stanley Cup Final. Yes, Stanley Cup Final. Come by and enjoy great food and beer specials for each playoff game. Tonight, the Blues will try to close out the Bruins on the ice. And Monday night, the Raptors from Jurassic Park hope to win the first NBA title in franchise history. Come to Moneyline at Park MGM. Eat, drink, and bet. All right, so what a show this has been. It's been crazy with the Matuszak stuff, Mrs. Matuszak calling in.
Incredible.
And everything that we have to talk about. But there are some things we want to get back to. Of course, we were talking earlier, guys, about OTAs. Paul Guenther, we heard from Burfict, and here I want to play this first clip. Here is Guenther talking about his former Bengal player and now his Raiders player as well.
Well, I've spent a lot of time with him, obviously, in Cincinnati, as both as a position coach and as a coordinator. And anytime you can add a guy with his talent and knowledge of the system, when he became available, it was very attractive to us. So it's he knows that the system inside and out. He can get us in and out of calls. I think some of the returning players are seeing the knowledge of the system that he has out here on the practice field. So it's good to have him.
So, guys, I think that's a big deal because of the complexity of that defense. And we saw last year, right, some issues with the younger players getting confused, getting to learn the system. Having a guy like Burfict back there has got to benefit people, right?
Yeah, he talked about, he's talking about the fifth level things because Burfict's there instead of just the first level things that he had to kind of start at ground zero with these guys.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah, and you've also, usually it's like a middle linebacker or somebody's kind of like that quarterback of the defense or something. That's what they've been lacking. So, he's definitely going to be that guy out there that's going to be able to kind of, like I said, just getting people in position before the snap of the ball is going to be a lot easier now.
Yeah.
But Kelly, besides the fact that Paul Guenther doesn't like linebackers, I'm just kidding.
I'm hearing that his system does not.
His system does not value linebackers. But besides that, Kelly, what is the complexity there about? Why is it hard for people to learn that defense?
It's it's just because it is kind of complex because there is a lot of kind of like play at the line. It's like you're lining up, but you are looking at what the offense is doing a lot more, and you're just a lot more moving parts in there to where he doesn't have just like one call when he goes out there. There's going to be kind of multiple calls that you're going to go with, and that's why you kind of need somebody like a Burfict who's been out there that's been like, okay, here's preset, here's motion or whatever, here's where we're going.
Right. So there's a lot of freelance. Not freelance, but there's a lot of it's almost like getting an audible from a quarterback, right? But you're on the defensive side of the ball, you're able to switch up the play depending on what you recognize, which is why having Burfict there is such an important addition in my view.
Right.
And they also asked though, like what is Guenther seeing so far from the players that he's gotten this year, and including Burfict and of course some of the young players they've added. Jonathan Abram appears, I'm wrong about him. He's been lighting it up. He's, in essence, they've already kind of said, yeah, he's going to start there. But here's what Guenther had to say about the defense shaping up for this season.
It's like it's like having a quarterback that you've coached in there so you can get in and out of calls at the line of scrimmage. Last year, we didn't do that as much. We did it a few times, and I just felt like it was a lot for the guys in the first year of the system to put that added weight on them. I wanted to just kind of go out and play. But now, in year two, adding a guy like him and having another year into the system, the guys will pick it up a lot faster.
All right, that was about the complexity. That was supposed to go before my question for you, but I screwed up.
I should probably listen to the sound for the show before because I was like, hey, here's exactly what I just said.
Yeah, that was me. That's a great thing about radio is you make your mistakes on the air, which is phenomenal. So, but anyway, I think that defense, how good are they going to be? we're not going to know until we get into camp and see them actually line up and get into some preseason games actually and see. I think they could be very much improved. They could be marginally improved. It's going to be a wait-and-see game, I think, guys.
Yeah, and you mentioned Abram as the starter. He was the starter the second they drafted him. The kid's a player. I mean, he's a heat-seeking missile. He's out there. Like on draft day when I wasn't a huge fan of the pick, it wasn't because of the player. It wasn't because of his play. It was because of the position.
Right.
Understood.
But Gunther, he had really high praise for him. He's saying he doesn't sound like a rookie out there. He sounds like a veteran already.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting. I do want to talk about, we've had such a crazy show here with Steve Delsohn talking about John Matuszak here close to the 30th anniversary of his passing, and then John's mother calling in. That was unexpected, but certainly we appreciate that. But I do want to talk about next week's show a little bit, guys. Next week, on Father's Day, ironically, with who we're going to be talking to, is a special guest that we're going to have on, a former Raider, well-known even outside of Raider Nation. But next week, Chaz will be on assignment, but Kelly and I are going to be speaking with Todd Marinovich. So Todd Marinovich is going to join us for an extended period of time on the show next week. If you read the Sports Illustrated article from January of this year, where Todd is, his struggles back and forth with addiction, it particularly is poignant because he's come to grips with his relationship with his father, and phenomenal. He's now an artist living in San Diego, and his artwork is actually phenomenal. Go to marinovichart.com and you can see it. But Todd Marinovich will be with us next week. We appreciate him taking the time on his Sunday to join us next week. Guys, it's going to be a fascinating interview. I think that Raider Nation's going to want to watch.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, he was one of those guys that came in and we just had, the Raiders had, and the Raider fans had such high expectations. We thought this is going to be the kid that takes us to that level and just sustains it for a long period of time. And then what a story, just so many different things happening. And it'll be fun to catch up with him after all these years just to find out exactly, what was going on at that time and what's going on now.
Yeah, and he's in talking to him in prep for the show next week, he said, hey, I'm an open book. Nothing is off the table, so we're going to ask him questions. If you guys have questions, drop us a note on our Facebook page, Twitter, or whatever. If you have a specific question for him, let us know. We'll ask him. Again, he's a work in progress, like us all, but his trials and tribulations clearly much more in the public eye,
right.
And the relationship with his dad and how that all happened, and now what he's come to grips with. He's actually, for the first time, being honest, really honest with himself about the fact that his dad abused him and physically, mentally, and so on. And so it's a fascinating discussion. I know some people like to bag, as you said earlier, Kelly, on people who've struggled. I root for people like that. I think to see somebody get their life together, forget football, forget what money he had and he doesn't have anymore, or the fact that he doesn't play football or he never panned out as everybody thought he would. You want to see somebody do well. And so catching up with Todd next week is going to be pretty fascinating.
Yep.
Be good stuff. All right. Well, that's going to wrap it up, guys.
Wow.
We're done. It's crazy. First of all, I'd like to thank Kelly Kreiner. Kelly, thanks for being with us again today, of course, as usual, in your duties. Okay, we got a nod. Chaz, thanks, man. Enjoy your assignment next week at the golf tournament. Right?
What? I thought I was going to mini camp.
All right. And for our engineer, David Stepanian, and Kelly Kreiner and Chaz Osborne, I am Skalko Branson. Check us out, silverandblacktoday.com. Check out the archive of this show and all the channels you get your audio. Subscribe on YouTube as well. We appreciate you guys being with us. Until next time, may the autumn wind always be at your back. Take care, everybody.